War is brutal enough on its own, but you know, W2 had a way of stacking catastrophes on top of each other. Soldiers often found themselves fighting two enemies at once, the one carrying a rifle and the one coming straight out of the earth, sky or sea. These events rarely make it into popular documentaries, yet they shaped battles, ended operations, and in some cases killed more efficiently than artillery. Today we're breaking down 6 natural disasters that hit soldiers in the middle of combat and left unforgettable marks on the war. Let's get into the events that turned already chaotic front lines into scenes of pure environmental violence. Anyone who studies military history eventually runs into the same lesson: hostile terrain in Russia has defeated more armies than Russian commanders. During the winter of 1941–42, temperatures on the Eastern Front plunged to -40 degrees Celsius. For German troops, whose entire campaign was built around speed and warm weather mobility, the freeze was catastrophic. Weapon oil solidified. Rifle bolts wouldn't budge. Engines failed outright. Frostbite cases skyrocketed into the hundreds of thousands, often resulting in amputations performed in field stations that were barely warm enough to keep morphine liquid. But the key detail serious historians appreciate is this: the cold didn't just stop combat, it changed tactical behaviour. German soldiers relied on burning fuel rations and vehicle parts to keep small pockets of warmth, which in turn made them easier targets at night for Soviet patrols, who'd already adapted with cold weather gear and reindeer hide insulation. From a survival standpoint, the lesson is straightforward: gear and training mean nothing if they aren't matched to the environment. The winter became a natural disaster in slow motion. Unrelenting, predictable, and absolutely lethal. The Burma campaign is often overshadowed by the Pacific Island battles, but honestly, no environment broke armies quite like the monsoon. When the rains hit, rivers became walls of water overnight. Whole units disappeared into mudslides. Supply roads vanished, and trenches turned into brownwater canals crawling with snakes, leeches, and dysentery-producing bacteria. Japanese forces, used to jungle warfare, still struggled to maneuver in waist-deep mud that could pull boots off your feet. Allied Chindits, attempting long-range penetration missions, dealt with so much rain that their weapons corroded within days. In some areas, the monsoon reduced the fighting to sporadic ambushes because sustained operations were physically impossible. One British medical officer wrote that a soldier could be perfectly healthy one morning and close to death by evening, simply from immersion foot and infection. That's how fast nature could break a man in Burma. There's a good reason desert armies carried goggles, scarves, and spare weapon parts. The desert itself was a battlefield opponent. On the North African front, those sandstorms, the infamous Khamsin winds, could last for hours or even days, turning the air into a red haze of stinging sand. It buried trucks, choked engines, and grounded entire air forces. When Rommel and the Afrika Korps advanced or retreated, they often planned around these storms, not because they feared them, but because storms offered the kind of cover that radar and reconnaissance simply couldn't penetrate. At the same time, storms caused friendly fire incidents, stalled armor columns, and erased terrain features soldiers depended on. For modern survival students, the lesson is quite clear. Limited visibility combined with abrasive particles destroys coordination faster than enemy fire ever will. The Pacific, you see, was the only major World War II front where soldiers faced a regular seasonal threat capable of sinking ships larger than entire European navies. Typhoons chewed through fleets, destroyed supply caches, and randomly determined which amphibious assaults would succeed or fail. In 1944, Typhoon Cobra struck the US Third Fleet near the Philippines, capsizing 3 destroyers and killing 790 men. Planes were ripped from carrier decks. Battleships rolled so violently that 18-inch guns slammed loose in their mountings. And this wasn't during combat. This was just the ocean, acting alone. Ground troops fared no better. On Okinawa, a typhoon hit mid-campaign, delaying operations for days and drowning supply dumps under meters of water. The storm killed more men than some firefights and destroyed vital medical equipment needed to confront the island's high casualty rates. Italy's Apennine Mountains, well, they were unstable long before World War II, but once artillery, tunnelling and bombing intensified, entire ridgelines became geological hazards. Soldiers in the Italian campaign reported tremors that tested the stability of trenches, bunkers and cliffside roads. In some cases, shellfire triggered landslides that wiped out infantry companies in mere seconds. One of the lesser-known examples occurred near Cassino, where a series of tremors and landslips buried Allied positions and forced engineers to reroute entire supply networks. The destruction didn't come from enemy fire. It came from the ground, giving out beneath men already pinned under sniper fire and mortar rounds. In warfare or survival, unstable terrain is an invisible killer. The mountain doesn't care what uniform you're wearing. Summer on the Eastern Front brought about another threat. Wildfires sparked by tracer rounds, explosions and dried-out grasslands. Some were accidental. Some were exploited tactically. Either way, these fires forced mass movement, broke defensive lines, and created zones of thick smoke that blinded both sides. The fires weren't small brush episodes. They were sweeping walls of flame, consuming entire kilometres. Infantrymen wrote about heat so intense it melted plastic components on field gear and filled foxholes with superheated air. Armoured units had to divert around flaming fields as their tracks risked igniting spilled fuel. It was one of the few instances where the battlefield transformed into something that actively chased soldiers.